Researchers. Here today we want to present our study. We want to present our study focused on determining university students' demographics impacts on the use of internet for educational purposes. First of all, I'd like to thank my co-authors, Professor Mukli and Professor Sotorovsky, for their collaboration. First, our study reviews some related literature, and after that, some survey data has been collected and statistically evaluated using SPSS package, whose results we'll present at the end before discussing conclusions of the study. So, ICTs provide many opportunities to higher education because their exclusive aim is to diminish the barriers of space and time. Benefits of ICT in education have been studied by Killian 2000. After that, in the proceedings, you can read more about it. And these advantages include accessibility, convenience, flexibility, financial benefits in the form of increased efficiency and increased student enrollment in these study programs. After that, Rilan and Gilani discussed that internet in education has the potential to provide innovative learning approaches and strategies to be continually embedded in cognitive, social, and cultural contexts. Flexibility provided in online learning environments enables all intelligences to be represented and further cultivated, disregarding the physical location of the student, a study presented by Nelson in 1998. After that, Zhang in 2004 states that access to ICT and its usage are of primary concern in both developed and developing countries' economies, but direct advantages of ICTs in the quality of education in these countries may be difficult to measure, and that's still a continuing challenge for these economies. While traditional higher education institutions have to overcome increasing competition and globalization, they have to transfer to online learning environment as soon as possible. Prior to making ICT investments in education, higher education institutions, public or private universities, research centers have to and need to identify characteristics and behaviors that enable students, participating students, to be successful in an online learning environment. For this to happen, and the primary scope is the importance is to get some important facts regarding course offerings and student support services. Socio-economic factors that influence ICT usage are related to especially gender and age. We will study the effects that gender variable has on usage of ICT or internet for learning purposes after the literature review. Income, education, and infrastructure were the most important variables according to Hibria et al. 2003 study. Gender-related studies, we have cited Orgo, Young, and Max Poran, which favor female students as more motivated and ambitious in using online learning environments, as opposed to the reverse findings, which favor male students, John et al., Shoshani, Sherman, and Ba in 2010. So, family background-related studies. Family background, namely father's job and family monthly income, has been included in this study as independent variables, which we will study the relationship and the effect they might have or not on the usage of internet for learning purposes. So some family background related studies, Becker and Thoms, respectively in 1979 and 1986, suggest that low-income families will underinvest in their children's human capital and outcome. But we have an opposing findings of the other study by Catherine et al. In 2012 that found that family income on children's IQ, intelligence quotient, and educational attainment are insignificant and typically close to zero. That means that children from poor family background could also have equal access to education and attend a very good university, just like any other children coming from better family backgrounds. Survey data. Now, structured questionnaires, each having 10 questions, were distributed to 60 students, randomly selected in a public university, in the University of Durrës, to be more precise. In using regression analysis, an ideal ratio exists between the number of samples and the number of independent variables. So the ideal ratio could be 20:1. In other words, 20 samples would be required for each independent variable. Since in this study 4 independent variables are included, in ideal conditions we could have some 80 samples included, but still 60 samples are even acceptable and really predicted well to study outcomes. So predictor variables, independent variables, are gender of the student, field of study, father's job, and monthly income. As you can see, we have some social demographic variables included. And the other dependent variable is use of internet for learning purpose. Since its length, due to its length, we have shortened into this abbreviation. So later in the study and tables, you can just see that. Now, this variable is a dichotomous one, meaning that it can have only 2 answers, yes or no. In such cases, we cannot use a simple linear regression analysis because it couldn't work out. So we have to use some binary logistic regression analysis in order for our study to be accurate and data to be properly processed, let's say. So, survey instruments. These 3 types of techniques have been used to statistically evaluate data we have obtained from questionnaires. Frequencies and cross-tabulation techniques have been used to obtain demographic data of the students included in the study. After that, some independent t-tests to test the effect of one independent variable to the other, on the other, has been used between gender variable and the other categorical field of study variable. Now, let's explain this. In order for independent t-test to be implemented on some data, we need both variables be categorical. I mean, having categories of responses presented in structured questions. After that, as we just talked about, we use binary logistic regression technique to predict the relationship between each social demographic variable for independent variable we mentioned above, and the effect they might have on use of internet for learning purposes. So results that we got from frequencies and crosstabs techniques. So we have 33 participating male students, which make approximately 55% of the total participants, and we have 27 female students. 70% of them are information technology students, while 30% are administrative assistant ones. The former can be explained by Craig et al. 2005 that the world of computing is described as a male domain where women are underrepresented both in IT education and IT industry. Most frequent father's job relates to private sector employee, followed by businessman and public sector employee. Relatively, let's say, intellectual jobs that might affect children's willingness to pursue a higher education diploma. 21.7% of the students' family monthly incomes reach this quota, 200 till 300 euros, which is relatively low as opposed to father's jobs. But this could be explained by the fact that students need to keep some private confidential data regarding their family close to the chest, and they couldn't like to share it with other people. Results, gender, the relationship between gender and field of study. by using independent t-tests. Firstly, this test is generated as it usually does, and so we have some probability significance value which is greater than 0.005, which means that we should have some equal variances tables looking at. So there we can see the degree of freedom and the significant value. This test found that despite higher participants of males than females in the study, gender does not have any statistically significant influence in selecting the study program at a public university. For 58 degree of freedom, which corresponding to the standard tables equals some coefficient of 2.000, the probability is nearly 1, which is much more greater than it should be, the threshold value, I mean. This result opposes Gregg et al. In 2005. So after crosstabs, we have some other demographic divide that we want to share with you. More males, 31 to be more exact, than females, 20 of them, that use the internet for educational purposes. More information technology students, 36 to be more precise, tend to use internet for learning than administrative assistant students, which make up some 15 number of it. So children of private sector employees, 21, followed by those of public sector employees, 10, and businessmen, 9 of them, tend to use internet for learning purposes. Also, students deriving from the lowest family income category, which could be included in the quota of 100 to 200 euros per month, tend to use the internet for learning purposes more than others do. We explained that in some last 2 slides, I think, and it had to do somewhat with confidentiality of family data, let's say. So, from binary logistic regression, we usually have 4 tables, but 2 of them are most important than any others. So we have this table 11, we'll see in the full proceeding of the paper, omnibus test of model coefficients regarding, we have here or another relationship between gender and use of internet for learning purposes. So if you can see, in the last column, significance column, here we can see that it's less than 0.05, which makes up for a very good coefficient and a trusted one. So what does it mean in other words? If our hypothesis means that gender is really affecting the use of internet for learning purposes, this coefficient has to be at most 0.05. If it is less, then it's okay, our hypothesis is right. But if this coefficient could be greater than 0.05, then the new hypothesis, the inverse hypothesis could be accepted. And we could say it is not just a chance event. So it's okay. We can say by conclusion that gender really affects the use of internet for learning purposes. After that, here we can concerning gender with use of internet for learning purposes, in the last column, as you can see, we have some exponent b. It means that number 5.425, it means that males, since they were in greater number, they were more using internet for learning purposes that female students did, it says that males tend to use internet for learning purposes 5,425 times more than females do. Just like that. So here we have another table. We can see the relationship between field of study and use of internet for learning purposes. Well, our significant value is, larger than it should be. So it approximates almost 1, it's 0.814. So we can conclude that field of study really does not make a difference or is not statistically significant on use of internet for learning purposes. But let us discussed this, this conclusion really could relate to the fact that the students that were participating in the survey, well, there wouldn't be really a difference between their field of study because now in each study program, at least at our university, internet for learning purposes is a continual demand for students and for their learning activities. So really it wouldn't make a difference even if they were information technology students or administrative assistant ones. I mean, both groups could make good use of internet for learning purposes. So it could be explained by this logic. Let's get on to father's job versus, effects or not, the use of internet for learning purposes. Here we have another insignificant value of 0.480, which means that even though father's job could be classified as an intellectual one, or even father could be a retired person or unemployed one, or not even having a higher education diploma, it doesn't really make a difference if children from this family, because they have equal chances of attending a good university or attaining a higher education diploma. These studies during literature review, if you remember, were also supported by previous related studies. So it's okay, we have some kind of support and at the fieldability. Now, last coefficient we need to study is monthly income of the family they're coming from, family background. It's too much larger than the other one, so it's somewhat like 0.8899. It's too much. So we can conclude monthly income, family monthly income doesn't really make a difference or doesn't really have a significance over use of internet for learning purposes. How can we explain this? Because some researchers, or generally speaking, people could think that having more monthly income could lead also to purchase of new electronics or IT equipment. It doesn't really make a difference because public universities and in general quality assurance universities or higher education institutions could well provide their students with facilities, IT facilities, labs, etc. So students could well make use of, let's say, public instruments and facilities to get better learning on different subjects. So it doesn't really make a difference. They could not own a computer, let's say, or internet connectivity at home, but they could make good use of it at labs or in the school campus as well. So conclusions, just to make it short, use of internet for learning purposes by students at the higher education institutions in Albania is determined by gender. Male students tend to be more adept than female students. Female attitudes are determined by their role as a caretaker and let's say more family oriented than male do, thus lacking time for education pursuits and during navigation in internet, in web in general. Factors that do not determine use of internet for learning purposes include field of study, father's job, and monthly income, as we just discussed. In significance, the fact of field of study can be related to the use of internet for learning activities regardless of study program. Another conclusion relates to father job and monthly income that are socio-economic variables important to children, human capital and outcomes, but not necessarily affect the use of internet for education. The reason is the provision of internet connection inside university campus, thus disregarding the need to purchase personal and individual computer or even pay for connectivity in internet. Continuous suggestion could be made to female students and for lecturers and higher education institution managers to encourage female students in their online participation in learning activities, because as it could be seen by the study, male students were more adept and tend to use internet more than female did. And thank you.
Universiteti I Durrësit për kumtesën e rëndësishme e cila si kundër u pa mbështetet në hulumtimet empirike dhe sjell të dhëna me interes që natyrisht zgjojnë vëmendjen dhe kuriositeten edhe për hulumtimet e mëtejme. Përgëzojmë për këtë hulumtim. Tani në radhë është kolegja Suela Ndoja që do ta paraqes kuftesën.